Liberal Party. This transfer of power was strictly in keeping with Honduras's constitutional line of succession, as the vice president had recently resigned. The regularly scheduled general elections remain set for this November, and interim president Micheletti is not a candidate. The previously nominated candidates from the two major parties remain on the campaign trail, and both candidates and parties overwhelmingly approve the ouster of Zelaya. At every step in the process, the legitimate democratic government strictly adhered to the Honduran Constitution, and civilian leadership of the military still remains intact. The military did not execute a coup. It thwarted the coup plotted by Hugo Chavez and implemented by Manuel Zelaya. Honduras's democratic institutions are operating today, and its government functions are secure. The only aggrieved party in this process was Mr. Chavez, whose brazen attempts to corrupt Honduran democracy was thwarted by what has now been nicknamed the little country that could. The people of Honduras stood up to Hugo Chavez, Daniel Ortega, the Castro brothers, and they stood up for freedom and the rule of law. For their courage, President Obama has condemned them. He has called the constitutional ouster of President Zelaya not legal, claiming an expertise in Honduran law over and above that of a unanimous Honduran Supreme Court and a nearly unanimous Honduran Congress. Secretary of State Clinton lazily joined the international media in calling the removal of President Zelaya a coup, a term fraught with dark memories of military juntas in a banana republic. Of course, this is the same administration who insists on calling the recent fraud in Iran an election. The Obama administration joined in Chavez's preposterous Soviet-style propaganda resolution in the Organization of American States condemning Honduran democracy. Hondurans I've spoken with a number of folks who have missionary groups there, medical groups there. I've talked to Miguel Estrada, who was born and raised in Honduras and now a constitutional expert in this country. This morning I talked to former Honduran President Ricardo Maduro, and they are all totally befuddled at the strange response they're getting from the supposedly free world, including our own administration. Why we are siding with Hugo Chavez. This morning in Russia, President Obama reiterated his support for Zelaya, the would-be dictator, as the rightful president of Honduras. According to ABC News, he said, "America supports now the restoration of the democratically elected president of Honduras, even though he has strongly opposed American policies." Continuing with the quote from Obama, we do so not because we agree with him, we do so because we respect the universal principle that people should choose their own leaders, whether they are leaders we agree with or not. End quote. The President appears to think his support of Zelaya is based on some principles of self-determination. He speaks as if opposition to Zelaya is based on partisan political differences. Zelaya was not ousted by political enemies. He was ousted by a government controlled by his own party. He was ousted by a unanimous Supreme Court, operating in accordance to the Honduran Constitution and in conjunction with the nation's Attorney General and Supreme Electoral Tribunal. These folks followed the rule of law. Mr. President, the Honduran people have chosen their own leaders. As those leaders in a constitutional, bipartisan, and nearly unanimous process removed Manuel Zelaya from office. The Honduran people have upheld our president's so-called universal principle. The people seeking to undermine that principle are Hugo Chavez, the Castro brothers, Daniel Ortega, Mel Zelaya, and unbelievably, the Obama administration. This is not about politics. This is about the rule of law, freedom, and democracy, all of which are being defended by Honduras, the Hondurans' rights now against their enemies, of which we appear to be one. Why are we not standing with them? Blood was shed in Iran while we stood idly by. Zelaya's return to Honduras on a Venezuelan jet and with the moral authority of the United States will almost certainly lead to more bloodshed. What are we doing on the side of tyrants and sworn enemies of freedom, going so far on their behalf as to threaten economic sanctions against one of our poorest and bravest allies? Secretary of State Clinton is reportedly planning a meeting with Mr. Zelaya in Washington this week. I implore her to reconsider that meeting. Elevating an impeached and disgraced autocrat is more than an insult to Honduran democracy. It is a green light to other would-be Chavezes around Latin America. It is a signal to the enemies of democracy and freedom that the United States no longer stands as a beacon of liberty. It is a signal that the rule of law is now passé in Latin America and that Hugo Chavez and his corrupt and brutal ideology has free rein to meddle wherever he pleases in the Western Hemisphere. Mr. President, what do we stand for if not for freedom, democracy, and the rule of law? Where is the spine of the administration to stand up to anti-American and anti-democratic thugs in our own backyard? Where is the intellectual clarity to see the facts on the ground as they really are? Manuel Zelaya is a criminal, a constitutionally removed former president of a proud and noble country. To my knowledge, no administration official has refuted or even grappled with the facts regarding Zelaya's attempted coup. Given those still undisputed and documented facts, on what basis does the administration demand Zelaya's reinstatement? His removal from office was no more a coup than was Gerald Ford's ascendance to the Oval Office or our newest colleague, Al Franken's election to the Senate. It is bad enough that the President's ad hoc and highly personalized foreign policy seems to be less about supporting the rule of law than it is about supporting particular rulers. But the last 4 weeks suggest that the President cannot even be counted upon to support our legitimate allies. What happened in Honduras last week was not a tragedy. It was a triumph of democratic courage and the unyielding determination of a free people to stand up to despotism. The tragedy, Mr. President, has been the failure of the West and of our own government in Washington to stand for justice and freedom in Latin America. It is not too late. I have written to Secretary Clinton, and there is a growing congressional support for the legitimate government in Honduras. Everywhere I go, someone comes up to me and tells me to stand up for freedom in Honduras. There is still time to look at the facts, even to visit Honduras itself. Call down there, talk to the people, even Americans in the Peace Corps or on missionary work. Ask them if they're living under an oppressive military junta. They will laugh and tell you they are living under an independent and vibrant democracy with a representative government led by people they elected. They'll tell you about the free and open debate in the ongoing presidential campaign and who they're supporting in the November elections. There is still time to correct our position and support our true allies. And because we can, we should. We must. Today, and I'll try my Spanish again, un amigo de libertad es un amigo de Honduras. A friend of freedom is a friend of Honduras. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I